They say when you're born with the sight, you're never really alone. I used to think that meant I had a gift. Something special. Something holy. But I don't think that anymore. Because last night, I saw the sky bleed. It wasn't a dream. I know the difference. Dreams don't taste like rust and ash. They don't leave your sheets damp with sweat, and your hands trembling long after the sun has risen. I was standing in the middle of Dunmire's Old Town Square. The sky above me was torn open, thick red streaks dripping down like open veins. Buildings were crumbling. Flames danced across rooftops. People ran, their mouths open in silent screams, eyes black and oozing. And in the middle of it all was him. Pepe Morello. He stood beneath the old statue of St. Bartholomew, calm as ever, holding a blood-soaked book in one hand and a knife in the other. Behind him, the ground had split open, revealing a staircase spiraling into pitch darkness. And from below something moved. Something vast. Something blind. That's when I woke up, gasping, heart pounding, blood trickling from my nose. The sight always comes with a price. Sometimes it's just a headache. Sometimes it's worse. This was worse. The air in my bedroom was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth. My fingers were clenched so tight they'd left marks on my palms. I sat up slowly, reached for the notebook on my nightstand, and scribbled down every detail I could remember. Date, time, colors, sounds. Especially the way Pepe looked at me in the dream, like he knew I was watching. I closed the book and stared at the ceiling. The fan above me spun lazily, wobbling slightly with each turn. Outside, the fog had settled deep into the town again. It always came thick in the mornings, like the ocean was trying to pull Dunmire back into its mouth. But this morning, the fog felt different. Heavy. Watching. I got dressed and left the house without breakfast. My shoes echoed on the wet pavement as I walked toward the library. That's where I work, if you can call it that. Mostly I repair old books, answer the occasional question about local history, and drink far too much lukewarm coffee. The streets were nearly empty. The town always feels like it's in a long pause, like someone pressed the mute button on life here decades ago. I passed the bakery closed. The barbershop, shutters down. Even the church was quiet, and that place usually hums with early morning hymns. When I reached the library, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was dark still. I didn't bother with the lights. I liked the quiet, the dust, the smell of old pages and time. I headed straight for the archives in the basement. If the dream meant anything, and it always does, I needed to see if the altar, the staircase, the square, had ever been real. Dreams tied to the site always connect to something. I just had to find it. I pushed aside a stack of forgotten files, revealing a wooden cabinet older than most of the town itself. Its drawers were packed with yellowed maps, blueprints, handwritten notes in ink so faded you had to squint to read them. I flipped through them one by one, hands trembling. And then I found it. A map of Dunmire dated 1897. It was labeled Construction Records, red section. The square was there, but beneath it, a set of dotted lines. A spiral. A tunnel. The same spiral from the dream. I traced the path with my finger. It led directly beneath St. Bartholomew's statue, and ended in an unmarked chamber. No label. No explanation. Just a single word, scratched in the bottom corner of the map. Veil. My stomach turned. Outside, a crow screamed, loud and sharp, like a warning. I folded the map carefully and slipped it into my coat. Then I sat back, heart pounding, mind spinning. Something was coming. Something old. Something buried. And somehow, I was the only one who could see it. But for the first time in years, I wished I couldn't. The fog was heavier than usual that morning. Thick and low, like it had rolled in straight from the sea to wrap its cold fingers around Dunmire. I hadn't planned to go out, not after the nightmare, but something in my chest itched. A quiet, clawing instinct that whispered one word, woods. Whistler's wood had always made people uneasy. It grew just outside town, gnarled and dark like something angry. People said compasses stopped working in there. Others claimed they heard music, soft humming, though no one could ever find the source. When I was a kid, my grandmother used to say, "Don't go near the trees after rain. That's when they talk." She wasn't joking. I didn't bring much with me. Just a flashlight, my notebook, and the brass key from my grandmother's chest, tucked into my pocket like a charm. As I stepped off the crumbling path into the trees, the fog seemed to close behind me like a door. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of my own boots pressing into wet leaves and brittle twigs. About 20 minutes in, I started to feel the hum. Not in my ears, but in my bones. A low vibration that made my teeth ache. My right eye stung, the one the sight always touched first when something was coming. I paused and scanned the trees. And that's when I saw it. A mark, carved deep into the bark of an old oak. It wasn't just any symbol, it was the same one from my dream. A crooked eye weeping blood, with a line running straight down the center. It pulsed. I swear to God, the mark pulsed. I stepped closer, heart hammering. The bark was wet, sticky, not with sap. The red was fresh. I reached out before I could stop myself and touched it. The world flipped. My head reeled, and the trees around me stretched. The forest turned dark, much darker than it had been seconds ago. Shadows twisted between trunks, crawling low like smoke. I stumbled back, blinking hard. My breathing was sharp, loud in my ears. Then I heard it, soft footsteps behind me. I turned fast, ready to shout. It was a boy. Maybe 8, maybe younger. His clothes were damp, torn at the sleeves. He stood barefoot in the dead leaves, staring past me with glassy eyes. "Hey," I called carefully. "Are you lost?" He didn't answer. Just started walking toward me, slow and steady. Then he stopped a few feet away and looked up. "He's waking up," the boy whispered. "The one who sees without eyes." My mouth went dry. "Who told you that?" But he didn't answer. He just started to hum. A tune I couldn't place but somehow knew. It made my skin crawl. "Where are your parents?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't move. I took a step forward, he screamed. Loud, raw, and sudden. A sound that split the fog and echoed through the trees like it was bouncing off old stone. And then he ran. Vanished into the mist before I could even call out again. I chased him for maybe a minute before I realized I was lost. Completely turned around. I stood still and listened, but there was nothing. Not even the hum. Not anymore. Eventually, I found my way back to the main path. But the mark was gone. The tree was just a tree again. When I got home, I wrote everything down. The boy. The symbol. The humming. And that phrase. The one who sees without eyes. The sight hadn't shown me a future this time. It had shown me a warning. And the woods had whispered back. But the worst part? I could still hear the boy's humming, in my head. Like it was stuck there, looping endlessly. And deep down I knew. That tune wasn't meant for me. It was meant for him. The one still asleep beneath our feet. The bells of St. Elric's rang low and heavy that morning. That deep, slow kind of toll that lingers in your chest, even after the sound is gone. Dunmire was wrapped in fog, as usual. You'd think the town was floating on the edge of the world with how often the mist swallowed it whole. I hadn't planned on going to the funeral. I barely knew the man, Roger Hembly, a retired fisherman who used to yell at kids for walking too close to his fence. But something pulled me there. The night before, I'd had a vision. It was brief, a flash of a black coat brushing against a coffin, hands folding a white cloth over a pale face, then eyes. Pale, glassy eyes staring back at me from inside the casket. So I went. The funeral home sat near the cliff's edge, built out of gray stone and crooked wood that had darkened over the years. It leaned slightly like it was tired of standing. There was no name on the door, but everyone in town just called it Peppy's Place. Inside, the air smelled like roses and something else, something sour and old, like wet wool left in a cellar. A few people stood in the back, all dressed in black, murmuring to each other in voices that barely rose above the creak of the floorboards. Then I saw him. Pepe Morello. He moved slowly through the parlor, his suit neat, every movement deliberate. He was tall, maybe a little taller than me, and thin, not frail, just sharpened like something carved from bone. His hair was silver and combed back perfectly. His skin was pale but smooth like wax. He looked older than 60, but there was something ageless about him, too. Like he'd always been here, just watching. When he turned to me, he smiled. Not wide. Not kind. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Carlo Ventresca," he said. "I was wondering when you'd come." I froze. I hadn't spoken to him before. Maybe seen him once or twice from a distance. "You knew I'd be here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everyone comes eventually," he said, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "But you've been seeing things again, haven't you?" My stomach dropped. He didn't wait for a reply. Just gestured toward the open casket in the center of the room. "It helps to look. Death teaches the living more than books ever could." I didn't want to go closer, but I did. My feet moved without me. Roger Hembly lay still and pale, hands folded neatly over his chest. He wore his Sunday best, though it looked too big for him now. His skin had a yellow-gray tone. The cloth under his head was deep red. And then I saw it. His eyes were closed, but in my mind I saw them open. The same vision. Glassy eyes staring straight through me. I took a step back. "You've seen what's coming," Pepe said behind me. I turned to him. "What are you talking about?" Pepe walked slowly past me, placing a gentle hand on the coffin. "The mist is getting thicker, isn't it?" he asked, almost to himself. "You know what that means?" I didn't answer. He turned to me, eyes sharp. "The sight is not a gift, Carlo. It's a warning. And warnings mean little when no one listens." I felt cold. My mouth was dry. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Pepe smiled again. Wider this time. His teeth were too straight, too perfect. "I don't want anything," he said. "Not yet." He walked away after that, slowly disappearing behind the thick velvet curtain at the back of the room. I stood there, heart racing, skin crawling. I should have left right then. Should have run out and never looked back. But I didn't. Because I knew. Deep down, I knew that man was tied to everything. The visions, the whispers, the cold that never left my bones. Pepe Morello wasn't just a funeral director. He was a gatekeeper. And something on the other side of that gate was already reaching through. The wind had picked up again. It howled against the windows like a warning, shaking the old glass in its frame. I sat in my grandmother's dusty attic, cross-legged on the wooden floor, staring at the thing I had no memory of ever seeing before. A black iron chest. It sat tucked beneath a moth-eaten quilt and 2 cardboard boxes marked kitchenware, as if it had been purposefully hidden away. I wouldn't have found it if the floorboard hadn't creaked beneath me oddly, like it wanted my attention. The chest was small but heavy-looking, about the size of a typewriter. No designs. No locks. Just a single rusted latch, sealed shut with wax. Dark red wax. I didn't know what made me hesitate, but my hand paused above the latch. I felt something, not fear exactly, but the feeling you get when standing at the edge of a cliff. Then I opened it. The wax cracked like dry leaves, and the latch popped up with a reluctant groan. The air that escaped smelled like forgotten years, stale paper, lavender, and something faintly metallic. Blood, maybe. Inside was a stack of old things. Leather-bound notebooks, a silver crucifix stained black at the edges, several Polaroids, and a thick yellowed envelope with my name written across it. In my grandmother's handwriting. "Carlo," it read. Nothing more. I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten. My grandmother had died 10 years ago, and in all that time, no one ever mentioned this box. I pulled out the envelope with shaking hands and unfolded the brittle letter inside. It began without greeting. "You have the sight because it runs in our blood, and that blood was touched long ago by something that does not sleep." I stopped reading. My pulse had quickened. Every part of me wanted to run. But I kept going. "We were never supposed to speak of it. But you must know the truth now. The sight isn't a gift. It's a mark. A mark placed on our family since the year 1797, when your many-great-grandfather bargained with the blind one in exchange for power and protection from plague. The others in Dunmire made a pact. They would guard the seal, and once every century, they would offer one who sees to keep the seal strong. I let the letter fall onto the floor. My breathing was uneven. I stared into the chest again. The Polaroids were old. Some were of my grandmother, young, stern-eyed, standing in front of Whistler's Wood. Others were of the same altar I'd seen in my vision, though covered in roots and moss, almost forgotten. And one, the last photo, made my skin crawl. It was of me, 7 or 8 years old, standing by that same altar. I didn't remember ever being there. I was smiling. But something was wrong with my eyes in the picture. Both of them were clouded over white. I backed away from the chest. A soft thud came from downstairs. I froze. Another sound, like footsteps. But I was alone in the house. I closed the chest, but the latch refused to lock again. I slid it back under the quilt as quietly as I could, then moved to the attic door. My body felt stiff, my legs heavy like I was wading through water. On the way down, I clutched the envelope tight in my hand. The hallway was empty, silent, but something had changed. The air was colder, the lights dimmer, and on the hallway wall, just outside the attic, a new handprint had appeared. Wet, long fingers, dragging down. I stepped past it, heart pounding, trying not to look back. I didn't know if I was going mad, or if I'd just opened something that should have stayed sealed. But deep down, I knew one thing for certain. The visions were not warnings. They were memories of what was always meant to happen. I couldn't sleep again. The visions were getting worse, sharper, louder. They came like lightning behind my eyes. Sometimes they flickered in and out of focus, like a dying candle. Other times, they hit me hard, like a hammer to the skull. Last night, I saw something that shook me, a face made of blood and bone, chanting in a language that didn't belong to this world. This morning, I woke up with my fingertips raw, dirt beneath my nails, and no memory of how I got outside. I had to find answers. I knew where to look. At the library, the air smelled of mold and forgotten time. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the back archive room. Only I and the head librarian had the keys. The door creaked open, and dust bloomed into the air like smoke. Inside were old records, local maps, and a locked cabinet marked restricted, historical. I didn't ask for permission. I picked the lock with a paperclip, something I learned in my bored teenage years. Inside were rolls of parchment, faded photographs, and, what I had hoped for, a map. It was hand-drawn, yellow with age. It showed the original design of Dunmire, back when it was a colonial fishing outpost. But there was something else. Beneath the town, inked in red, was a spiderweb of narrow tunnels. The lines twisted like veins under skin, spreading out from a central point marked only with a crude symbol, an eye with no iris. That same symbol had shown up in my last dream. My stomach turned. I traced one of the lines with my finger. It led directly beneath the church, past the graveyard, under Main Street, and then to a spot right beneath my house. The sight pulsed in me like a drumbeat. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the map. I lit a candle and sat at my kitchen table, studying it. Rain whispered against the windows. The wind moaned softly, as if the whole town were breathing. And then I heard it. A whisper. Not inside my head, real. Soft, broken words, coming from the vent behind my sink. I leaned in, heart pounding. Awake, the blood. See her, soon. I stumbled back, knocking over the candle. Shadows jumped on the walls. I grabbed the flashlight and ran to the basement. The air down there was heavy, like wet wool. I followed the sound, faint whispers, like someone speaking underwater. At the far end of the basement, hidden behind old boxes and cracked shelves, I found a rotting wooden hatch, covered in dirt and cobwebs. I didn't remember it being there before. I hesitated. Then I opened it. A sharp smell rose up, earth, rust, and something older. My flashlight flickered as I pointed it down the hole. A stone staircase spiraled into darkness. Every instinct told me to close the hatch and walk away. But my sight flared behind my eyes, and I saw a flash, my own face, screaming in the dark, blood pouring from my ears. Still, I stepped down. Each step creaked, and the deeper I went, the colder it got. The tunnel walls were damp, carved from stone long ago. Symbols lined the walls, some like the ones in my dreams, others I didn't recognize. A soft sound echoed ahead, scraping like metal on stone. I turned the corner and saw it. A chamber, small and round. In the center, a stone pedestal. Around it, bones, animal or human, I didn't know. My breath froze in my throat. On the pedestal sat an old book, its cover cracked and blackened. As I stepped closer, the whispers returned, louder this time. Carlo, Carlo, the blood calls you. I picked up the book. My hands shook as I opened it. The first page was blank. The second, written in a language I didn't understand. But the third, it had my name. Carlo Ventresca, the final seer. I dropped the book. The candle in my vision flickered out. And in the darkness, I heard footsteps behind me. Not echoes. Not mine. Something was down here with me. And it knew I was awake. I couldn't sleep the night after finding the map. I lay there in bed, eyes open, staring at the cracked ceiling while the wind outside howled like a thing alive. Every creak in the old house sounded like whispers crawling up through the floorboards. Something had changed in Dunmire. Or maybe something had awakened. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. The historian lived on the edge of town, in a crooked house that leaned slightly like it had been trying to fall over for years. Her name was Agatha Reed. She used to teach at the local college before it shut down. Now most folks avoided her. Said she knew too much. Said she talked to dead things. Perfect. When I knocked on her door, I half expected no one to answer. But after a long pause, it creaked open. A thin woman with sharp eyes and wild silver hair peered out at me. She looked like someone who hadn't smiled in a decade. "You're Carlo," she said. Not a question. I nodded. "I need to ask you something. About the tunnels. And the symbol." She stared at me for a long moment. Then without a word, she stepped aside and let me in. Her house smelled like dried herbs and dust. Books were stacked on every surface, walls, chairs, even the kitchen sink. Most of them had no titles on the spine. Some were handwritten. "Sit," she said, pointing to a chair that had more cobwebs than cushion. I told her about the map, about the strange marking on the tree in Whistler's Wood. I described the symbol, a circle with an eye scratched out, surrounded by jagged lines. And I told her about the dreams, the visions, the burning town, the altar. She didn't blink once while I spoke. When I was done, she stood and disappeared into another room. I heard drawers being pulled open, papers rustling. When she returned, she placed a single leather-bound book in front of me. Its cover was cracked and dark, like dried blood. On the front, written in fading red ink, were 3 words, the Red Veil. "This," she said quietly, "is what you're seeing." I opened the book slowly. The pages were thick, yellowed with age. Inside were sketches of the same symbol I saw in the woods. Diagrams of underground chambers. Rituals written in an old, curling script. And then I saw it, an illustration of an altar, built of black stone, surrounded by hooded figures holding knives and candles. A figure lay on the slab, eyes open, mouth screaming. I looked up at her. "What is this?" Agatha lowered her voice. "A death cult. They called themselves the Red Veil. They believed something sleeps beneath Dunmire. Something ancient. They said it was blind, but it could see through others. Through seers. People like you." I felt cold all over. "What did they want?" "They wanted peace," she said. "That's the twisted part. The blind one was said to hunger for sight, for pain. To keep it asleep, they made sacrifices. Human ones. Every 100 years. I closed the book. My heart was racing. "And when was the last one?" She paused. 1897. The blood drained from my face. "Every 100 years," I whispered. "That means—" Agatha nodded. "This year. During the eclipse." I stood up, pacing the room. "And they think I'm the next sacrifice?" "If the sight was passed to you, yes." Her eyes narrowed. "Your grandmother. She had it too, didn't she?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Agatha stepped closer. "Listen carefully. They believe if they don't offer a seer, the blind one wakes. And if it wakes, the town dies." I could barely breathe. "So they'll kill me to stop it?" "Or," she said grimly, "they'll let it rise, hoping it chooses someone else." My head was spinning. The world suddenly felt too sharp, too loud. "I need to stop them," I said. "I need to end this." Agatha handed me a faded page she had torn from the book. "This is a counter-ritual, but it was never finished. Your grandmother tried once. She failed. The Red Veil is still alive, hiding in plain sight." I stared at the symbols. The ink shimmered faintly in the dim light. "Then I'll finish it." She reached out and touched my shoulder, firm and cold. "You don't just see what's coming, Carlo. You live it. And if you're not careful, it'll eat you from the inside out." I left her house with the book clutched in my hands and a weight in my chest heavier than anything I had ever felt. The sight wasn't just a curse. It was a countdown, and it had just started ticking louder. I woke up with a scream caught in my throat. It was still dark out. The clock on the wall blinked 3:14 a.m., its red glow casting strange shadows across my cluttered room. I sat up in bed, soaked in sweat, heart thudding like a drum. The dream had been different this time. No fire, no altar. Just faces. Familiar ones. My neighbors. My friends. People I grew up with. All staring at me with empty eyes and wide, frozen smiles. But they weren't smiling out of joy. They were grinning the way something dead might if you forced its face to move. I rubbed my temples, trying to shake it off, but the feeling stuck to me like damp fog. I couldn't sleep again. Not after that. So I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my notebook, and stepped outside. The air hit me like a wall, cold and heavy with moisture. The mist was thick tonight. Too thick. Dunmire had always been a foggy town, sure. But this wasn't natural. The street lamps looked like floating orbs, their light swallowed before it could touch the ground. Everything was quiet. No wind. No bugs. Not even the distant sound of the sea. It was like the town was holding its breath. I walked down Main Street, toward the library. I didn't know why exactly. Maybe I just needed to be near something familiar. Or maybe I felt safer around the books. They didn't lie. They didn't smile with empty eyes. As I passed McAllister's bakery, I saw something move behind the frosted glass window. A flash of pale skin. I froze. The bakery had been closed for hours. I stepped closer and peered inside, cupping my hands to the glass. There was someone standing behind the counter. Not moving. Just standing there. Staring straight ahead. It was Mrs. McAllister. But her eyes weren't blinking. I backed away, heart pounding. She hadn't noticed me. Or maybe she had and just didn't care. Either way, I didn't want to be seen. I hurried down the street, cutting through an alley behind the post office. I needed answers, and I had a feeling the town records room might have them. The library was dark, but I had a key. Perks of being the part-time book restorer. I slipped inside, locking the door behind me, and made my way to the back archives. My flashlight cast long, trembling shadows on the walls. Everything smelled like paper, dust, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. I opened the oldest filing cabinet, the one no one touched anymore. Inside were records from before the war. Births, deaths, town minutes, and something else. Something sealed in a thick manila envelope, tied shut with twine. I untied it and let the contents spill across the table. Photographs. Faded. Sepia-toned. Men in robes. Women holding candles. A symbol scratched onto the floor, a circle of thorns with an eye in the center. And at the bottom, a list of names handwritten in red ink. It was titled Witnesses of the Veil, 1897. I scanned the list. Half the last names I recognized. McAllister, Dorn, Fisk, and Morello. Pepe. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. These weren't just old townsfolk. These were the founders of something. A group. A ritual. A pact. And now, their descendants were still here. Still watching. I turned the page over and found something else. A warning scrawled in the margins. The fog comes first. Then the silence. Then the hollowing. I read it again. The fog comes first. I shoved everything back into the envelope and slipped it into my bag. As I turned to leave, I saw something flash across the glass doors of the library. A face, pressed against the glass, staring in. I froze. It was Deputy Lennox. He looked dead, pale and unmoving. But his eyes, they were wide. Too wide. And his mouth was moving, though no sound came out. He lifted one hand. Tapped once. Twice. Then slowly dragged his palm across the glass. I didn't wait. I turned off the flashlight, ducked behind the desk, and held my breath. After a minute, the tapping stopped. Another minute. Stillness. I peeked up. He was gone. I waited another 10 before sneaking out the back and sprinting home through the fog. The silence pressed in on me like a weight. As I reached my porch, I paused. Across the street, lights flickered on inside houses. Shapes moved behind curtains. Watching. Waiting. My vision pulsed. Suddenly I wasn't standing on my porch anymore. I was underground. Cold stone walls. Chanting. Faces in hoods. An altar. Blood. And Pepe's voice, echoing through the dark. It begins with mist. It ends with the blind. I gasped and staggered backward. And I finally understood. The town wasn't being haunted. It was preparing. And I wasn't just seeing what was coming. I was living in the middle of it. The moment I stepped into the tunnels beneath my house, it felt like the air forgot how to breathe. Cold, wet, and thick, it clung to my skin like something alive. The trapdoor had groaned open like a throat clearing before a scream, and the stairs creaked with each cautious step I took. My flashlight flickered. Twice. Then stayed on. I held it tight. The beam cut a thin line through the dark, barely enough to show the dirt walls around me. They weren't just packed soil. Symbols, carved ones, lined the path like they were waiting for someone to return. Old symbols. Red veil symbols. The same ones I had seen in my vision, burned into the altar stone. I moved slowly, my heartbeat keeping time. The tunnel curved left, then again, dropping deeper. I felt like I was descending into something ancient, something buried for a reason. The walls breathed with me. Or maybe I was imagining it. I turned a corner and froze. Ahead was a wide chamber, empty at first glance. I stepped inside. My boots scraped against stone now, not dirt. The ground had changed. And the temperature had dropped even more. The room stank. Rotting paper, burnt hair, and something metallic, blood maybe. My flashlight caught on the far wall, where an arch stood tall and broken, leading into deeper shadow. But that wasn't what made me stop. The center of the room held a stone platform, an altar. It was cracked, but stained dark in a way that didn't look like age. My flashlight danced over grooves along the edge, grooves shaped like hands and faces, as if they were trying to crawl out. Above it, the ceiling formed a dome, with a hole at the top that let in nothing but blackness. I couldn't tell if it was natural or carved. Then I noticed the dust. Everything in that room was layered in dust, thick, untouched, except the altar. It was clean, as if something had used it, recently. I stepped closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. Maybe the sight. Maybe the same stupid curiosity that got people killed in horror stories. Either way, my feet moved without asking my brain. When I touched the edge of the stone, my head exploded with pain. I wasn't in the tunnel anymore. I was bound to the altar. I could feel the cold stone against my back. Shadows flickered around me, figures in red robes whispering in a language that hurt to hear. Above me, a face leaned in, Pepe. Calm. Smiling. Eyes filled with a madness, so deep it looked like peace. He was chanting. I tried to scream, but in the vision my mouth was stitched shut. Then I saw it. The blind one. It didn't come through a door or a hole. It simply appeared, like it had always been there. Its body was smoke and bone, and where eyes should have been, there were empty craters that oozed with black tears. When it moved, the ground wept blood. I saw the town burn. I saw children walking into the sea, smiling as if they were going home. I saw myself screaming forever. And then I was back. The altar under my hand. The tunnel around me. My body soaked in sweat, heart galloping. But something was wrong. I wasn't alone anymore. A sound scraped behind me, like nails against stone. I turned too fast. My flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled across the floor, its beam spinning. It landed on a figure. Tall. Thin. Wearing red. A mask of bone on its face. It didn't move, not a twitch. But I swear, I heard it breathe. And I heard the words. You've come home, seer. My legs didn't wait. I ran. I didn't remember the turns I took. I didn't care. My only thought was to reach the trapdoor again. To put earth and wood between me and that room. Between me and what was waking. When I slammed the door shut and fell against it, gasping, my heart still trying to beat its way out of my chest, I knew. The hollowing had begun. And I was already inside it. I didn't knock. I stepped into the funeral home, pushing the heavy door open with both hands. The air inside was still and thick, like the breath of something old that had been holding it in for far too long. The scent of lilies and disinfectant mixed with something else I couldn't name. Not rot, exactly. Something sweeter. Something wrong. The hallway was dim. Long shadows stretched across the wooden floor, and the walls were lined with old black and white portraits. People staring blankly, their eyes just a little too lifeless for comfort. I didn't call out for Pepe. I just walked deeper into the silence. I found him in the embalming room, standing by a cold metal table, gently washing the hands of a corpse. He didn't flinch when he saw me. Carlo, he said, not looking up. His voice was soft and smooth, like a radio from the 1940s. Funny how the dead still need so much care, don't you think? I said nothing. I just watched him. The body on the table was pale and stiff, a man I didn't recognize. His mouth was slightly open, as if caught in a last word. Pepe dipped a white cloth into a bowl of water, then turned to me with a smile. To what do I owe this visit? He asked, wiping his hands dry on a towel. You know why I'm here, I said. My voice came out colder than I expected. He nodded slowly, his smile never fading. The dreams are louder now, aren't they? They're not dreams anymore, I said. They're warnings. Pepe stepped toward me. The way he moved, slow and graceful, reminded me of a man dancing to music only he could hear. I imagine you've pieced most of it together by now, he said. Your grandmother tried to stop it too. Brave woman. But the truth doesn't care much for bravery. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You want to bring it back? He tilted his head. Bring it back? Oh no, Carlo. It never left. It only sleeps. Like a god between breaths. I clenched my fists. You're going to kill me. That's the plan, right? Offer me up on that stone altar. Open the gate. Pepe laughed softly, shaking his head. No. Not kill you. You misunderstand. You were chosen, Carlo. Born with the sight. Born from the bloodline of the last seer. Your death isn't an ending. It's the door. I took a step back. The shadows in the room seemed to shift, crawling toward me along the edges of the walls. Why? I asked. What do you get from all this? His eyes changed then. The warmth in them vanished like fog burned away by sudden heat. I want my wife back, he said flatly. I blinked. Your wife? He nodded once. She died before the first snowfall that year. Cancer ate her alive. The doctors called it quick. It didn't feel quick to me. His voice trembled for a moment, then steadied again. The red veil showed me the truth. Death is just a thin curtain. And the blind one, it can tear it. That thing isn't going to bring her back, I snapped. It's going to destroy everything. Maybe, he said with a shrug. But destruction is just a different kind of rebirth. Silence filled the room. Not just quiet, true silence. My heartbeat felt loud in my ears. I could hear my breath, shallow and fast. Pepe stepped closer. Too close. I know what you've seen, Carlo. The fires. The shadows. The faces melting like wax. But those are only possibilities. The sight gives you the shape, not the meaning. He leaned in. His breath smelled like cloves. The real question is, are you willing to stop it, knowing that doing so means never seeing her again? My grandmother? No, he said. Your mother. My blood turned to ice. You never knew, did you? He whispered. She tried to escape it too. But the sight found her. Found you. I couldn't speak. My tongue was stone. He turned away from me, walking back to the metal table. When the eclipse comes, he said softly, the sky will open. Whether you stand against it or kneel before it, the blind one will see again. I backed away, nearly tripping over the edge of a rug. My thoughts were a storm. My vision swam. I didn't remember leaving. I just knew that when I blinked again, I was outside. The mist had thickened. The wind had stopped. And I could still hear Pepe's voice echoing in my mind. The door is you. I didn't sleep that night. The visions had stopped, but I could still feel them crawling behind my eyes, like shadows pressed between glass and skin. Every time I blinked, I saw flickers, an old stone altar, twisted roots, blood soaking into the earth. I sat at my kitchen table, hands trembling over pages of torn history books, maps, and my grandmother's journal. The candle I lit flickered, the flame pulling toward the open window, as if something outside was breathing it in. I needed answers, real ones. The kind not written in coded diaries or whispered by dying old women. So I went to the one person in town who didn't pretend the darkness wasn't there. Her name was Claire Eaton. She used to run the town's newspaper before it folded years ago. Now she lived alone in a crumbling Victorian house at the edge of Whistler's Wood. Locals said she drank too much and talked to trees. I didn't care. When she opened the door, her face stiffened. You've got the look, she said. What look? The one my father had, just before he hung himself. Come in. The house smelled like dust and old wood. The living room was filled with boxes of yellowed documents and photos tied in twine. Claire sat across from me, her legs crossed, a cigarette burning between her fingers. Tell me what you see, she said. So I did. I told her about the visions, the altar, the tunnels, the voices in the mist. Pepe, everything. She listened without blinking. When I finished, she stood up, walked to a cabinet, and returned with a thick, bound ledger. It was cracked with age. The front read, Town Records, 1897 to 1901. She dropped it in front of me. That was the year everything changed, she said. Dunmire was drowning in sickness. Children dying. Crops rotting. People panicked. Until they made a deal. She opened the book and flipped to a specific page. There, in neat, careful handwriting, was a list of names. 13 of them. Founders of the Pact, she said. They called themselves the Red Veil. They believed something beneath this town was angry, starving. So they fed it. I leaned closer. They sacrificed a girl? I asked. Claire nodded. Her name was Beatrice Cole. 9 years old. They took her during the eclipse, down into the tunnels. Said the demon beneath would sleep if given a seer's blood. I swallowed hard. My heart beat against my ribs. A seer? I asked. Claire looked at me. Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. It runs in families, Carlo. Bloodlines. Your grandmother knew. That's why she left those warnings. That's why you're seeing it now. It's not just a curse. It's a mark. My head spun. I stood, backing away from the table. So this is happening again. The eclipse, it's in 3 days. Yes, she said quietly. And the cycle repeats. Every 100 years. A seer must be sacrificed, or the blind one wakes. The name hit like a thunderclap. I'd read it in passing, once, in a ripped page buried deep in my grandmother's chest. The blind one. The thing that sees without eyes. The thing that dreams beneath stone. And Pepe? I asked. He's not just a funeral director, she said. He's the last living Red Veil. He kept the books, the rituals. He's waited a long time. And now he has you. My hands were shaking again. Sweat rolled down my neck. I looked out the window. The mist was thicker than ever. Can it be stopped? I asked. Claire leaned forward. Maybe. But only if you go down there first. And finish what your bloodline started. A silence stretched between us. You want me to go into those tunnels? I said. Alone? No, she said. I want you to go prepared. She handed me a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside was an old dagger. Not rusted, not broken, but polished, waiting. It's silver, blessed in 1901. The girl's brother made it, before he disappeared. I held it, the weight cold and real in my hand. It didn't shake. For the first time, the visions didn't come. But something else did. A thought. Clear. Sharp. This wasn't just a warning. It was a test. And I was running out of time. The town felt quieter than ever before. Even the gulls had stopped screaming above the rooftops, as if they'd flown away for good. Fog had crept in thick, pale as bone dust, swallowing the streets and wrapping the houses like an old, damp blanket. Dunmire was holding its breath. And I was too. I hadn't slept in 2 days. Every time I closed my eyes, the visions clawed at me. Not like before. These were different now, clearer, louder, more urgent. I saw the altar beneath the town glowing red, saw the faces of the townspeople in flickering torchlight, blank-eyed and humming like a hive. I saw myself, always strapped down, always screaming. But I'd made a choice. If I had to walk straight into the mouth of whatever was coming to stop it, so be it. I packed slowly that morning. Not out of hesitation, but out of dread. Every item I folded into the worn canvas bag felt final. My grandmother's journal, the letter she left me, the silver key I found hidden behind the library fireplace. A bottle of holy water from Father Dennis, though he hadn't said a word when he handed it to me, only looked at me with hollow, tired eyes. Before I left, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook one last time. If this is my last entry, I wrote, then let it be known, I chose to see. I stood up and felt the floor creak beneath me. Dunmire was old. It had bones, and they were starting to shift. I stepped outside. The mist was thick and sour. My breath came out in white clouds, even though it wasn't cold. The street was empty. No children playing. No dogs barking. Every window was shut tight. Curtains drawn. Doors locked. I passed the corner shop. The owner, Mr. Harrow, usually waved at me from inside. Today, the windows were covered in newspaper. Through a small tear in the paper, I saw his face, still staring, like he was watching something I couldn't see. I didn't wave. Instead, I kept walking, turning toward the woods. Whistler's would look different now. The trees were darker, thicker. The path I had taken before was barely visible. But I knew where I had to go. The trapdoor waited for me beneath the old chapel ruin at the forest's edge. I had found it days ago, hidden under rotten floorboards and moss. It led down into the tunnels beneath Dunmire. I knelt, brushed the dirt away, and used the silver key. The lock clicked. The metal groaned. I hesitated. My hand trembled on the iron ring of the hatch. Somewhere deep below, I could feel it, something massive and patient shifting. The blind one. I climbed down. The ladder was cold and slick, and the air smelled of mildew and old stone. As I reached the bottom, the ground opened into a narrow passage lit by flickering lanterns. They were expecting me. I stepped forward, my footsteps muffled by damp earth. The walls were lined with carvings. Symbols I recognized from the journal. Eyes. Circles. Mouth sewn shut. One symbol kept repeating, an open palm with an eye in its center, bleeding. My chest tightened every time I saw it. Then I heard it. A hum. Low at first, like a distant machine. But as I walked deeper, it grew louder. Human voices. Dozens of them, humming in unison. The tunnel widened into a vast chamber. They were all there. Town officials, neighbors, old women I'd known since I was a boy. All wearing crimson robes. All standing in a circle around the stone altar. The same one from my dreams. It pulsed with a dull red light, like a heartbeat. And at the center stood Pepe. His hands were raised. His voice calm and clear. "The hour is near," he said. "The veil thins. The seer has arrived." Dozens of heads turned toward me. Blank faces. Hollow smiles. I stepped into the circle, unarmed. No point running. I had seen this moment before. If I changed anything too early, the visions would unravel, and I'd lose control. I needed to get closer. I needed to see it through, to the moment I had not yet seen. Pepe smiled as I approached. "You came willingly," he said. "I came to end this," I replied. He nodded, almost proud. "That's what all the chosen say, right before they scream." Then the circle closed in, and everything dimmed. Not from the torches. From the eclipse. The air grew thick and metallic. I felt it settle in my lungs like smoke. A deep rumble echoed from below, vibrating through the stone. The altar began to glow brighter. They seized me. I didn't fight, because the real fight hadn't started yet. As they laid me on the cold slab, I closed my eyes and listened to the chants rising. And just before the ritual began, I opened my sight fully, one last time, and saw something new. A shadow behind Pepe, watching. Not a man. Not even a shape. Just hunger. And it saw me too. For the first time it saw me. And it smiled. Tomorrow, the sun would rise blood red. If it rose at all. The air in the tunnels was thicker than ever. It tasted like old blood and burnt metal. Every step I took echoed behind me, but I was alone. At least, I thought I was. I had made it this far. The visions had led me here, again and again. In my dreams, this was where it always ended. The stone altar, the torches flickering with red flames, the chanting that started low and grew into something unbearable. And tonight, the sky above Dunmire had turned a bruised violet. The eclipse had begun. I carried my grandmother's letter in my coat pocket. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but her words still burned in my memory. If you see the altar, it's already too late. But if you hear the name, say the countervow. Say it with your whole soul. I didn't even know what the name was. Only that I would know it when I heard it. I reached the final chamber, the heart of the underground. It was just like the vision. The ceiling stretched into shadow. Carvings covered every inch of the stone walls. Eyes with no pupils, mouths full of needles, and strange figures kneeling before a spiral symbol that made my stomach churn. And there, standing calmly beside the altar, was Pepe. He was dressed in a robe the color of dried rust. His hands were clasped in front of him. Behind him, hooded figures lined the edges of the room, silent and still. "You came," he said. His voice was soft, like a lullaby. "I saw this," I replied. My throat was dry. "I saw you standing here. I saw everything burn." "Yes. That's the gift. You see the storm before it comes." He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. And storms, Carlo, cannot be stopped. Only endured. I didn't run. I should have. But something inside me whispered, "This has to end now." "You think this will bring her back?" I asked. "Your wife?" He didn't answer for a moment. His eyes flicked toward the altar. "She was the first to believe," he said finally. "She gave herself willingly. And still he slept. But with you," he paused and his smile twisted. "With you, he will awaken." The hooded figures began to hum, low and guttural. The altar pulsed with a dull red light. Two of them grabbed me, before I could move. They were stronger than I expected. My head hit the stone floor. The world spun. They dragged me up the steps and forced me onto the altar. The stone was freezing, even through my coat. My arms were pinned. I heard Pepe begin to chant. The words weren't human. They scratched at the inside of my skull. The light above flickered, and for a second, I saw something in the air, like smoke with teeth. The sight kicked in. I wasn't just seeing the moment, I was falling through it. I saw the town above, streets cracking, trees wilting. I saw people kneeling in the mist with blood running from their eyes. I saw a great shape rise behind Whistler's Wood, tall and eyeless, its limbs bending the wrong way. It screamed, but the sound wasn't from its mouth. It came from under the skin. And then I heard it. A name. A name I had never known, yet somehow recognized. It was like hearing the sound of your own death. My grandmother's voice returned to me in that same instant, clear and steady. "Say the countervow." I opened my mouth, and from somewhere deep inside, deeper than fear, I spoke. Words not in English, or any language I had learned. They felt like thunder cracking bone. The torches went out. Pepe's chanting stopped. He looked at me, eyes wide, and for the first time afraid. "No," he whispered. "No. You can't." But I wasn't speaking anymore. Something else was. The altar shook. The floor split. The shadows tried to crawl up the walls, but a blinding white light surged from my chest, my sight unleashed. Not a warning this time. A weapon. The figures screamed and vanished into dust. Pepe was thrown back, hitting the wall with a wet snap. I felt the blind one enter me. Not fully, but enough. It was like swallowing a storm. My eyes saw every moment of time at once. My skin burned, but I couldn't scream. My mind bent, but didn't break. I didn't know if I had won, or simply become the prison. The altar cracked beneath me. The eclipse ended. The silence returned. I stood alone, in the ruins of the ritual chamber. My hands shook. The light inside me dimmed, but it didn't go out. I was no longer just Carlo. I was the one who saw. I was the one who remembered. And now, I was the one it dreamed through. I walked out of the tunnel before dawn. The mist parted around me. I could still feel Pepe's gaze, even in death. And somewhere in the distance, I heard the sound of whispering. Not outside. Inside. The first thing I remember was the cold. Not like winter cold, this was different. It crept into my bones, into my thoughts. As if even my memories began to freeze. I was still lying on the altar. The stone beneath me felt like ice, slick with something thicker than water, blood maybe. My arms were free now. Someone had cut the ropes, or maybe they'd crumbled away during the ritual. The silence was unbearable. I could hear my heartbeat, loud and irregular, like a drum calling something ancient. The tunnel walls around me were cracked, pulsing faintly. It was breathing. The entire underground chamber was alive. Pepe was gone. I sat up slowly. My vision was strange, fractured, as if I was looking through a cracked mirror, and every shard showed a different moment. I saw myself walking out of the tunnel. I saw myself dead on the altar. I saw a version of me screaming in an empty field. Then it all collapsed into one view, the here and now. There was a shape at the far end of the room. It hadn't been there before. It wasn't walking. It wasn't even moving. But it was getting closer. Like the distance between us was simply vanishing. A black figure. Tall. Slender. No face. No eyes. Just smooth, wet skin that shimmered like oil. The blind one. I couldn't move. My legs refused to obey. It stopped inches from me. The space around it bent. I could feel its thoughts pressing against my skull, slow and heavy, like weights pulling me underwater. But it didn't speak words. It showed me things. I saw the past first. The first time it was summoned, hundreds of years ago, when Dunmire was just a cluster of shacks on the coast. A girl, no older than 12, offered on the altar. I saw the cult, robed in crimson, heads bowed, not in fear, but in worship. Then I saw the pact. They didn't seal the demon, they fed it. Fed it just enough to sleep. Just enough to keep it dreaming. And dreams were its way in. The sight wasn't a gift. It was a crack in the door. I was the door. It leaned closer. No eyes, yet I felt it staring straight into me. Past the memories. Past the skin. Into the part of me I'd never shown anyone, not even myself. Suddenly, I remembered the words in Nana's letter. The counterprayer. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't even words. It was emotion, pure and raw. Regret. Love. Defiance. I began to feel it, not say it. The prayer wasn't something you read. It was something you became. I opened myself to it. The pain came instantly. My head felt like it was splitting open. Blood poured from my nose, my ears. I screamed, not with sound, but with thought. The room pulsed violently. The stone cracked beneath me. The demon recoiled, but it didn't vanish. No, this thing was old. Older than language. Older than death. It couldn't be killed. But it could be bound. And so, I gave it what it wanted, space. Not in the world. In me. I opened the door wider, not to let it out, but to pull it in. It fought. Oh, it fought. My body convulsed. My vision went white, then black, then something beyond both. I felt it clawing through my veins, screaming in a voice too big for sound. My memories burned. My fears shattered. But I held on. I was the sight. I was the one born to see, to suffer, to seal. Then it was done. Silence again. When I woke, I was still in the tunnel. The altar was split in two. The markings were gone. So was the mist. And Pepe. I never saw him again. Maybe the ritual consumed him. Maybe he was taken too. Maybe he got what he wanted, eternity, at a cost he never understood. I walked out of that place with the demon inside me. It doesn't speak. It doesn't sleep. It watches. And sometimes when I blink, I see things, horrible things. Things that haven't happened yet. But they will. Because the blind one dreams through me now. And I can never wake up. I don't sleep much these days. The dreams stopped the moment I stepped out of the tunnels, when the sky was still bleeding red from the eclipse, and the town was silent as a grave. But sleep? No. Sleep is for those who can close their eyes without seeing. And mine never really close anymore. Dunmire looks the same to most folks. The streets are still cracked, the sea still groans against the cliffs, and the same rusted swings creak in the empty park. But it's quieter now. Too quiet. Even the birds that never came back still haven't. People ask questions, of course, about the blackouts, about the disappearances, about what happened the night the sky turned wrong. But no one really wants answers. Not the kind I have. Not the kind that seeps into your bones like damp mist and settles behind your eyes like a shadow waiting to blink. Pepe is gone. Not dead, just erased. As if the earth itself swallowed him after that night. His funeral home sits abandoned, windows dark, door always locked. I pass by it sometimes. There's a feeling there, like the building remembers, like it breathes. And me? I carry it now, whatever it is. The blind one didn't go back to sleep. It went inside. I can feel it sometimes, pacing just behind my ribs. Not awake, not fully, but dreaming. And when it dreams, I see things. Faces I don't recognize, in places I've never been. Fires burning in cities I've never heard of. Whispers in languages I've never learned, curling through my mind like smoke. Some nights, I stand on the cliffs where the mist rolls thickest, watching the ocean. Not for answers, just for signs. And sometimes the mist shifts. Not with wind, but with purpose. As if something is watching me. I used to think the sight was a curse. A burden I never asked for. But now, it's the only thing keeping the world safe. I see what's coming. I feel the shape of it, moving beneath time like a shadow waiting for light. So I stay in Dunmire. I walk the streets. I watch. I write things down, even if no one will read them. Because I was born with the sight, and now, I am the gate between what sleeps and what wakes. And if the blind one ever stirs again, I'll be the first to see it. And maybe the last.